We have a ridiculous increase in mental health crisis with young people. We have a suicide rate crisis.
My life's equation for success is self-awareness plus discipline equals success. What is purpose? How do you teach a child purpose?
These are the most important things that you are ever going to develop in your life.
Welcome to the Education Podcast, where we believe you have infinite potential and that learning is the key to achieving greatness. My name is Jan Frolic. I'm your host, and let's dive right in. Hi everyone, quick note. So excited to announce that we are releasing a brand new version of our school year digital learning management system. It looks absolutely beautiful. Looking at a grade 3 number sense lesson here. It comes with a video, printable lesson, worksheet, and a quiz. Awesome platform for both parents and teachers. We've been working extremely hard on releasing it. It would mean a lot to me for you to share your feedback. Link is in the description. Take a look, let me know, and enjoy the video. Welcome everyone. Welcome to Education Podcast. In this podcast, we're hosting Captains and Poets. We have Jennifer Johnson, a parent, former educator, entrepreneur, and passionate changemaker, as well as Jan Frolic, serial entrepreneur, a corporate leader in diversity and inclusion space with a focus on gender equity. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's our pleasure. So you guys are the founders of Captains and Poets, and directly from your website, Captains and Poets creates more positive, engaging, and inclusive learning environments by weaving social emotional learning into daily school and home life. The result is heightened self-awareness, self-leadership, and a greater sense of agency and purpose. We ignite transformation from kids themselves. So that's directly off your website, but now I'd love to hear from you guys. First of all, what is SEL? I know it's a term that's hovering a lot in the education space right now. Just in your own kind of words and definition, what does SEL stand for?
Sure. So social emotional learning, SEL, is a really broad term. Maybe a good way to ground it is referencing CASEL's model. So CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning based in the US. So they describe 5 categories of skills that SEL covers. So everything from self-awareness to self-management, to social awareness, relationship skills, and decision-making skills. So it really covers a broad range of skills that kids need to thrive in a learning environment.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. How would you define it, Lindsay?
Yeah, it's like the castle pillars is sort of what we all base it around. But yeah, like character development is one thing, knowing yourself and who you are and what you believe in, and then also the social aspect where you interact with people and you can conflict resolution and problem solve and teamwork and all that sort of stuff as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. I, by the way, forgot to introduce you because you're part of
Just
I in my mind, you're a part of our internal team, but Lindsay is our chief curriculum officer, also a previous educator and homeschooler, and she's responsible for all the content and books and curriculum over here at Schoolio. Awesome. So why Captains and Poets? I know you guys have a very interesting way to position what a captain is and what a poet is. What does that stand for?
So we decided that the best way to really deep dive into the social emotional learning, where kids can understand, where educators can understand, where parents can understand, was to use a common language. So we chose the 2 archetypes, captain and poet. Captain being that driver within you, and the poet being your imagination and all the feels that you have, and that when they work together, you are your best, most authentic self. And they both live within you, and they both live within everyone, and giving all people access to both their captain and poet, and the language and the knowledge that it's both of them are within you is why we chose that.
Mm-hmm. I know various individuals kind of associate with, I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert, I'm this, I'm that. Does every single person have a captain and a poet within them? Or could you be leaning more towards one rather than the other? How does that work?
Yeah, I think every single person has that within them, have both. And yes, you can lean, and it will change every single day. And it will change every single moment. Like sometimes you're feeling more captain, sometimes you're feeling more poet, but the idea is to learn about both of them and balance them as best as you can.
Yeah. And some show up more outwardly, and some people might wear their poet on their sleeve. They might be a very emotive person. But what we teach kids is that you have to remember everybody has that poet inside. So it helps you to sort of see everybody on that human level. And same with Captain. We run a lot of leadership programs, teaching kids that, showing up authentically as a leader, like being yourself, is really the best way to lead, and that you don't have to be the outgoing person with the big booming voice to show your captain, because your captain might be super focused, super determined, but quiet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it depends what your previous life experience has been. For me personally, I feel like I've had so much leadership training that the captain is really honed in, but I've never really had such thing as emotional training. So tapping into that poet is I suppose what also a lot of SEL also covers, and it's extremely important and can't be ignored, right? Why is SEL such a growing trend right now? Why is it such a buzzword that's talked about everywhere? Where has it been before, and why is it important now?
Well, I think if you think about it, I mean, your emotional state is a really big, important part of learning. So how kids are showing up in the classroom. Some of them, you don't want to be too energized. You don't want to be too flat or disengaged. Like, the best way to learn is when you're in a calm, receptive state. So that's always been important, as well as the social environment of the classroom. Like, they have a big impact on how kids learn. But really, if you think about the last 2 years, there's been so much disruption. So many young people are showing up with mental health issues, everything from anxiety to stress, depression, general disengagement, with all the uncertainty we've all had to deal with. Similarly, if you think about it, some young people have had up to 2 years of their development disrupted. So where they would have been, socializing for the last 2 years and learning, what's age appropriate and practicing all the skills and behaviors, it's really been absent. So what we're hearing from schools in particular is that there's issues with kids being able to read each other, to understand facial expressions, to respect boundaries, to collaborate. Group work is really challenging. And also, I think kids' resilience is really low. And so when they hit challenges in their learning, they often have trouble persevering and knowing how to work through problems. So there's a whole host of issues that have shown up. So SEL is in bigger demand, more than ever.
Interesting. I feel like SEL is more so the vitamins than the Band-Aid to some of these problems. Because whereas I feel some of these problems may occur, and then some individuals may need therapy or maybe some medication, I feel like SEL is really this foundational groundbreaking vitamin preventative and nourishing and empowering, quote unquote, work, or what would you call it? What can we categorize it as? Is SEL work, a trait, a skill?
It's funny. Like, I think in corporate, people often refer to them as EQ and emotional intelligence. And that when you go a little deeper, they call it the soft skills. I think that we're spending quite a bit of time reframing that, because they are power skills. These are the most important things that you are ever going to develop in your life in order to be a good person, a good friend, a contributor to society, a volunteer, have purpose, have a work life and a career and a developed, thriving family. These kinds of things that you learn through social emotional learning. So yes, they're power skills. They're definitely power skills, and they're foundational, and they should be starting way earlier than we have. And right now, to answer your question, there's just been a deficit in this learning opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's also increase in a generation of adults realizing how valuable it would have been for us to learn those skills, right? It just seems like each generation gets a little bit more in touch and realizes hey, I would like to give this to my kids.
Definitely what I didn't have, that can see I would have used well.
That's one of the reasons that we just developed our SEL leadership program. Every parent, every teacher, every principal, the first thing they say is, well, where is it for us?
Mm-hmm.
Because they equally require this kind of learning because they didn't have it.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, it just wasn't common when we were kids.
I wonder whether there is some aspect here of the idea of Maslow's hierarchy somewhere in here, whereas we as humanity, as humans, are not even yet able to understand or tap into some of these more, quote unquote, let's say, advanced topics such as SEL before we establish some basic foundations, obviously, like food and sustenance and societal structures and hierarchies. And now with our world getting more and more advanced, just as a global Earth, now we're starting to see the need for these sorts of topics. SEL, how do we act as a society? What are our values? What are our ethics? Would you say that's the case? Because I feel like maybe in the times of 50 years ago, 100 years ago, my family grew up in like kind of like the post-World War II, during World War II, Eastern Europe. And I think for them, this sort of conversation would have been a little bit premature or almost like not fitting. But I personally feel like now is a time and place. We have automation, industrialization, we have technology to do just about anything. But now it's time to learn about ourselves and who am I in this world and how am I presenting myself?
Absolutely. I think it's a critical need, but also like a tremendous opportunity. Because you speak about Maslow, it's really the self-actualization piece. So who are we? How are we going to live in the world? How are we going to show up day to day in all of our relationships and different contexts in our lives? And what kind of world do we want to create? Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
And I would just add that, like, I think just like you said, like we're now becoming a bit of a global community. Even if we do live in small towns, our kids are connected in through social media, and so they are going to require these skills more than maybe previous generations where they were very insular and in smaller areas and really didn't have anything other than their own small community to socialize with.
Yeah, and I think technology and everything just makes life less of a grind. You look at in the farm, in the fields all day, and then you eat dinner and then you sleep.
Yeah.
And like that was life for many generations. And now with, like you said, automation and all that sort of stuff, digitization, we as a species have more time to slow down and more time to have relationships and interact with people and discover ourselves and our passions.
Yeah.
I'd like to explore is it even the right thing to do to quantify SEL within success criteria? How do we know if the SEL as educators that we are delivering, how do we know if it's quote unquote effective? First of all, how do we even measure effectiveness of it, right? It's not like you said, working in the field, did you harvest the corn correctly or did you not? How do we know? What are the metrics? And how do we also unify as a society? Or is there a need to unify as a society? I'd love to hear what are your thoughts
On the assessment piece?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is over the past 30 years, there's been a lot of research done. And so studies do show that students who participate in social emotional learning programs have everything from lower stress levels to higher empathy abilities, and academic performance goes up. The stats range from like 10% to 24%. But it is tough to tease out like, well, what individual skills are contributing to that? And I think that's where it's still a gray area. And I think that's the point you're making too, is like it's almost on an individual level, because how do you measure this? How do you measure what's working for one person versus another? Because we're all different. We're all unique.
Right.
Our needs are different in the classroom too, or in homeschooling.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you see results almost right away, right? In classroom, a classroom teacher could see that, oh, my kids collaborate better now. There's less conflict that I have to get involved to sort out, and they can see those sort of results. But a lot of it is just a long-term investment, right? We know as adults that we wish we had been taught these skills. We can teach our kids these skills and just hope that in 20 years we see that they have that character development and that they are more settled.
I get a little frustrated. I will be totally honest. Like, we get a lot of requests for metrics. I am very much of the mindset that if you can't make change with something that you can't measure. I do believe that in most places, but in this particular space with what we are doing, and we do provide all of that, we can do all of this, but the proof really is in the pudding kind of thing. It is, we watch it happen. We see the change, right? And I just think you want the metrics. You want to wait for these metrics to come. But in our own Board of Education, we had a 380% increase in human rights violations in 1 year. Okay, those are the metrics we should be looking at.
Yeah.
We have a ridiculous increase in mental health crisis with young people. We have a suicide rate crisis. Those are the metrics. So if you're going to wait for me to come up with the metrics on how the social emotional learning has worked in the school, we are going to have a very big problem because kids are dying, quite literally, right? And we can see the difference and we can hear the difference, and we have the quantitative backing and all the testimonials and the results from the teachers in the classroom. And I honestly think right now that's more important.
I think part of the challenge is there's so many things that we need to measure and that parents and schools are wanting to measure. So everything from the child's, emotional intelligence and ability to understand their emotions and what's going on, to their ability to manage stress, to whether they feel like they belong in the world and they have sort of a sense of purpose. So there's such a wide range of skills that we ask to get to measure in our engagements. And I think it is, as I mentioned before, it is tough to tease it all out because I don't think as human beings, we're not a bunch of drawers in a filing cabinet. It's not that simple. And so what we try to do is we really try to hit that intersection of well-being and identity that's kind of underneath all of these models. So if we think about that in really simple terms, I mean, when you're feeling good, if you're having a good day, you're feeling like your life's in balance and you've got physical, emotional, intellectual, social, spiritual well-being, all those different facets, you're more likely to put yourself out there to try something new, to create a new relationship or whatever it is. And likewise, if you have a really healthy sense of identity and who you are and what makes up who you are, you're then more likely to engage with the world around you in really positive ways. So they really feed each other. And I think that's why it's such a critical conversation right now, because we're really getting to the heart of like who we are as human beings and what we want for our children in a world that is increasingly complex, dynamic. So it's just, I think, really top of mind for people.
Absolutely. I can appreciate both sides of the coin. I mean, there are so many aspects of our humanity that we didn't have certain metrics for, that we just advanced purely based off of belief and anecdotal evidence. But the other side of me, that, the engineer side of me, and right now I'm doing a master's in machine learning and in decision making. So I also really understand and value the importance of finding the quantification and the proof. Yeah. And I really feel like it's extremely accomplishable. I think we are right on the edge of just a few meta studies or meta analyses of your heart rate, depending on certain practices, your self-reported mood, your amount of cortisol, blood sugar level, all these kind of things. There's already studies on meditation and journaling, but if we can somehow encapsulate a meta study on this sphere of SEL, I'm sure it's just going to start popping up over the next few years, and our strong beliefs and anecdotal evidence will be backed by really strong science very soon. Now, let's say we live in 5 years or in 10 years and we have incredible amount of data and research. We've all seen the changes that we can transform, but we also feel some of the pain that is happening around in schools right now, whether you're in the US, you're in Canada, in the UK, or anywhere, in Africa and Asia, in Latin America. There is some sort of friction when it comes to adopt the SEL. And whether it's in the lack of quote unquote proof, whether it's for whatever cultural or lack of understanding reasons, what do you feel like are some of the fears that are out there for adopting SEL, and how do we tackle them?
There's a whole host of them. I think some fear that their young people are being told what to think. Others fear the imposition of technology that's going to be monitoring their child to get all of those bodily cues, that you mentioned. I think in general, what we see, the biggest inhibitor is that it's a commitment. It's a commitment because social emotional learning is not just a one-time activity. It's something that has to be built into the day-to-day. So it has to be built into the curriculum, into the routines. Teachers need to be modeling it. And as adults, we need to be on the journey of, self-actualization, learning more about ourselves with the young people that we're trying to impart this on, because it is a journey, and we spend our whole lives kind of exploring who we are and bettering ourselves. So it's a big conversation, and I think it is showing up in different ways, in different areas. And we encounter that as we're going global, like just looking at, so for example, we'll go into Southeast Asia and there might be a concern about mental health in very young students, because I think it's by the age of 8, they take an exam that determines their path in life. So they're under tremendous pressure. So the SEL orientation is going to be a little bit different by culture as well.
And I feel like there's also a big gap in knowledge and understanding, and we're still catching up to it when it comes to what is even the self. What are these emotions and even inside voice and narrative that you have? I feel like we kind of take it as is. We are born with a particular perspective of the world. We grow up and we just exist with this self-narrative in our mind, and we never know anything else. And I feel like most people don't understand the composition and the makeup of the brain and what are feelings and what are thoughts. And the fact that actually, scientifically, feelings come before thoughts. Before we're able to have this inner voice with linguistic tools that says, I am hungry, or I am angry, or, Jan looked at me funny and I want to know why. Those thoughts, the rational thoughts, are actually first powered by the emotions, which are powered by some very, I want to call it animalistic, by some ancient circuits that we need to understand and respect and learn how to work with. And a lot of this SEL work taps into that, into identifying, understanding your inner drivers, your inner emotions, your inner kind of core feelings, before you even get to the realm of 1+1s and rational thoughts and behaviors. And that's a lot of catch up that we have to do in understanding of how our brain is fired and operating.
Which is interesting. It goes back to the question you just had, was like, what's the stopping, like what stops people? That stops people, right? Because that sounds terrifying, right? That's scary. That's like so much work.
Yeah.
And also I'm not prepared to do it because I don't really want to know what's going on in here. I don't have the time to like deal with that. So I would say like that's probably one of our bigger problems, is that the adults in the room are terrified to talk about and recognize the stuff that's happening to them and within them. And,
and a lot of people are raised to not show emotions.
Yeah, or like, especially for men, I think it's harder that they were just brought up with that's bad. That makes you soft or weak or whatever, right? So there may be a lot of us are scared, like you said, to explore and to teach that to our kids as well.
Right. And that's one of the most beautiful things that we've had the opportunity to work with boys, specifically actually around vulnerability and using and knowing that vulnerability is a strength, and how they can sort of reposition that. And then also giving them the access in a non-gendered kind of way to their captain and poet. All of a sudden, these captains, these uber masculine guys who are showing up in their hoodies and sort of like don't really want to be there, have permission to access their poet in their peer group with all the other kids that are doing the same thing. And all of a sudden, guess what? They love poetry. They write music. They would prefer to be on stage somewhere performing versus, being pigeonholed into this team that with the expectations that they're supposed to be running the hockey teams or soccer teams or whatever, that the parents and the schools think they're so good, so they have to continue doing that, and they don't really want to.
And like the performance piece,
this
is being authentic,
and that's where the beauty lies.
Yeah, and it gives like the captain and the poet are a great way to access a lot of the skills and the self-awareness you're talking about, because it gives access to some metacognition, but also it allows kids to kind of give a little space, like to their reactions, like, oh, and observe kind of. And so you're kind of separating that self and ego piece and just putting them more in the driver's seat of what they do with their emotions, what they do with their thoughts, and then decide how they want to show up.
Maybe one aspect of the fear as well is that a lot of the sentences that we use and the words that we use to describe this space seems like a very promising, like we promise well-being, we promise happiness, all your life's problems are going to go away. To some it may sound like an incredible journey. I want that. To some it may sound like, yeah, this is a bunch of fluff and it's scary. But really, if we were to distill it to specific techniques and tools, it can go as simple as, do you feel angry on a day-to-day basis? Or are you experiencing sadness? Or when you come home from work, do you feel extremely burnt out? Let's explore that. How can we deal with that? Are there ways around it? Are there things happening in your environment that you don't know how to deal with? And it's as simple as all these small pieces that add up to your life. And that's how you make your purpose or your self-awareness or your self better, really. It does come in all these small nuggets and examples that are relatable to every single individual that they almost can't disagree with. Yes, we can have here philosophical conversations about purpose and self-actualization and all this kind of stuff, which people may disagree with. But as basic as, do you feel angry? Do you ever feel angry and you don't want to feel angry? Yes. Okay, let's have a conversation about that, right? So, I think I'd love to keep exploring as the years go by about how do we bring this really important topic to individuals, not only kids, but specifically parents and educators and adults. And speaking of which, do you feel like it's a prerequisite for parents to understand and learn SEL before their children can learn SEL, or can we kind of forego that?
We have to wait. We're in big trouble, right?
I know. It's not a prerequisite, but I think it's an invitation and an opportunity. Like just looking at it in the home context, like even speaking myself as a parent, everyone's different. And I think for us to show up for our kids and to model for them self-awareness and handling things in a good, healthy way, each kid is different. Each child is different. And I think it's all those dynamics and all the triggers that we have within our relationship with other people that is actually, the opportunity for growth. Like that's the fertile ground. So I think it's an opportunity to explore the self-awareness piece, explore the well-being piece, and all of the skills that help us to thrive every day. And doing that with kids and modeling it. And even when we make mistakes, like to even like talk through that in healthy, appropriate ways about how we like to use the metaphor of a bicycle, like it's like riding a bicycle. And once in a while you get off balance or you take a wrong turn. And so it's about constantly coming back to center. And that's the journey, because it doesn't stop. It's lifelong.
We've built the program so teachers and parents do not have to learn it themselves, that the kids can just run with it. We have the videos, they watch it, they internalize it a lot faster than their parents or even their teachers. But I will say, like, the bright lights are the educators and the principals and the parents who make the effort to go on that same journey, because that's where the real generational change starts to happen, right? When your community and the language is being used together.
Yeah. And we're seeing parents are actually a huge driver in putting SEL programs in schools, because they're seeing the impact on kids of what's going on, and they're seeing how overworked teachers are, like, and it's another thing on their plates, but they want to see progress, they want to see better things. So it's been a tough couple of years,
and they want to know that when their kids are coming out of school day, that they're coming out as better people who feel like they've spent the day thriving.
Yeah, I would say it's not a prerequisite, it's like a concurrent. Like we always tell people, learn together, do it together. I mean, we're more homeschool focused, so it's happening at home. Like as a parent, your child's authentic self better than anyone else, better than, the armor they wear at school, right? If the parent is there with them, and it's okay to not know, it's okay to model for your kids that you're learning as well. Like you're modeling lifelong learning, you're modeling an interest in what they're learning, and just do it together. Like be students together. There's no age restriction on learning, right? So
right at the very beginning of the work today, when we started the company, we built home resources for exactly that reason. I mean, the school stuff is great. It's great. But the home resources where you can sit around the dinner table and have these really important conversations, there's such an opportunity there, right?
And it's so much better for the kid if there's continuity between school and home.
Yes.
First, like the verbiage and the skills is everything, right?
And I mean, parents know that, and the schools need it. And so they do make efforts of it. I don't know how well it works in most cases, but like to bridge that homeschool environment, right? Even and it's important for us, to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's the in my mind, the vision of SEL is that kids can show up as their best authentic selves everywhere in all aspects of their lives, on the team, at school, at home, in their friendships. That's what we want for them, isn't it?
Yeah. I think some other grandiose and very promising words that we wish upon the children are right from your website is greater sense of agency and purpose. And these are some really interesting words because I find that even most adults, I would say probably 99% of people don't know or don't feel or don't have that really strange word that is purpose. How do we define it? How do you guys define it? What is purpose? How do you teach a child purpose?
Well, we are trying to teach kids that they have everything they need inside of them to thrive. When I think about purpose, it's something that you evolve. I don't think it's some people say they discover their purpose at a certain point in life, but I think it's something that we co-create through our experiences and with everything we have inside of us, our unique abilities and who we are. So for young children, it's really about giving them that sense of belonging, in the home or school environment. It's about giving them the opportunity to contribute. And then as they get older and they discover their unique gifts, talents, strengths, they're able to build on that and develop a further sense of purpose. And I think the agency, even if you don't have a sense of purpose in your life, I think the agency piece is just so important that kids aren't feeling helpless in a world that can be really overwhelming. It's like you just take a moment, check in with what you need, check in with how you want to handle this situation, and you're not, so we're not feeling as overwhelmed. I think is really the goal there in terms of the short-term needs that are going on right now.
Yeah, we've heard in schools that, especially with kids having been home for 2 years from the school system, that when they have gone back to the school, there's a lot of parents phoning in on their behalfs or fighting their battles and things like that. And the teachers are like, we just want to help the kids, make decisions on their own and come to us and solve their problems by themselves versus the parents always coming in and trying to save them. So that having a sense of agency is like something that the education system is looking for.
Well, and responsibility. Yeah, because the responsibility goes with it too.
And I'd be interested for themselves. Yeah. I'd be interested to know like how that translates in the homeschool environment.
But the sense of agency for the kids?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that having been homeschooled, that's one of the big things is that they've learned how to go out on their own, right? And
yeah, most of the studies show that homeschool kids are more independent, right? They make their own decisions. Like, I haven't made lunch for my kids since they were 7 years old. Yeah, they make their own lunch. They do their own laundry because they're home all day. So they can do that. And it's less rigid. There's no bells. There's no periods. There's that timetable. Yeah, so, and they just go out in the world. Like, they go grocery shopping. They go to the bank. They do all these sorts of things. They are doing their work at the desk beside me while I'm making business calls and taking meetings and stuff like that. So I think they learn a lot of that independence more through modeling than by being told how to do it, right? But maybe the whole parents like phoning in and trying to fight their kids' battles increasing after COVID is yet another example of mental health problems as a result of COVID, right? You see kids who have social anxiety now because they have been at home for 2 years and going to school is a bit scary. Maybe that's a bit scary for the parents as well, right?
Sure it is, right?
Got the and it's not. They've been home for 2 years and the world doesn't feel as safe for them to send them out to as it used to. So I can see.
Well, it sounds like, to add to your point, is that people feel out of control. They feel like they've lost control, and their reaction is to try and control the external world rather than the internal world. And it doesn't matter which philosophy you tap into, Western, Eastern, it all talks about mastery of the self. I'm pretty sure even the word meditation means to become familiar with yourself, or something along those lines in the old Sanskrit language. And again, whether you look at Western or Eastern philosophy, they will all say very similar things. Like, it's all about within. And don't wait for salvation outside of you. No one's coming to save you. It's all about self-agency. Purpose is found from within by becoming familiar with your emotions, needs, wants, and knowing and learning how to deal with what's on the inside in correlation with what's on the outside of you, and making that dance in harmony and coexist. That's what it sounds like to me, really, if for to summarize it philosophically speaking. There's one actually topic that I found that I find always a double-edged sword, and that's self-awareness. I mean, I'm personally the number one preacher of that. I personally believe my life's equation for success is self-awareness plus discipline equals success. But I also often see that self-awareness might lead some individuals down more negativity or negative thought loops because they become self-aware of their inadequacies, of how far they are from accomplishment. How do we interweave and teach self-awareness while also being positive and optimistic?
Great question. It's a big question. So how do you teach self-awareness without going down that path? I think, well, self-awareness, you're not going to teach it in a vacuum. I think it has to be taught in the context of, and then if we're talking about learning, in the context of the home, school, or the classroom environment, because it's about helping kids to show up as their best selves and not having a false sense of who they are, but having a solid belief and starting to learn about what they are good at and their capabilities to build. And I think that's the role of the parent and the teacher is to help scaffold that. One strategy that we promote is if someone says, I need to be more confident in doing a certain thing, then you say to them, well, where have you done that in the past? And you help them to recognize they already have it in their repertoire. It's just in this particular situation, it's feeling a little more daunting. And so how do you start to build their confidence and take bigger and bigger steps? But yeah, the self-awareness piece, the philosophy around that, I find fascinating because I think if you think about it, the underside of self-awareness is self-consciousness, and it can be paralyzing. And I think that's what starts to happen when we're young and we start to develop self-awareness. All of a sudden, we feel like we've done something wrong, or someone sends us a message that we're different or we're not good enough, and that starts to paralyze us. And I think that's where self-awareness can be really detrimental. And that's exactly why we're teaching this program, so that the kids can really anchor. I have this captain, I have this poet, and no matter what's going on, I can always kind of count on them to help me show up and be my authentic self.
Yeah, and like you said, it can't be taught in a vacuum, right? So
At the same time, we're doing like growth mindset. Mistakes are good things. They help you learn, they help you grow, and like self-forgiveness and all that sort of piece has to go into it also. And I think the earlier you start teaching kids this, the less like self-awareness leads to noticing something that you regret from the past. That's like an adult problem kind of thing. You're like 40 and you realize, oh, I suddenly am more self-aware and my emotional intelligence is up. And now I have regrets for all these things that I did in the past. But that doesn't happen to like a kindergartner.
Yeah.
You start at the beginning.
I'm so glad you raised that, because a huge part of SEL is compassion. And it actually starts with self-compassion, like just accepting you're human, accepting your limitations, and taking a breath, and then, new beginning, start again.
Yeah, I'd not to be that person that keeps bringing it to science and scientific studies, but I'm going to be that person that brings it to science and scientific studies. But it really makes sense for humans to focus on the negativity. From a biological perspective, from millions of years of living in the jungle, it makes sense for you to remember, don't touch that anymore because it made you hurt. Don't go there anymore because there are scary animals. It made sense to live like that. But here we are nowadays, and I want to tie it back to that definition of purpose. I almost feel like truly understanding purpose is the antidote to any negative outcomes that may come in your life, generally speaking, in the future, from self-awareness or from external. If you understand that you are the co-creator, the creator of your purpose, and it comes from within, and it's already possible, you just have to feel, think, and do whatever it is that you want to do. That is the antidote to any of the negative aspects, because it doesn't matter what, maybe you did mess up, maybe things happen to you that are bad, but as long as your self-belief and narrative and purpose is tight, and it's what we just talked about, then that will power through any potential negative experiences that happen around us, because they're coming. We can't stop them. We just have to have strong armory and a strong foundation, right?
I love that. And I think we talk about two concepts that the captain and poet really help to bring out, and they're the living from a place of emotional courage and inspired action. And emotional courage is really being willing to kind of go deep, and like you have your deepest values, your aspirations, your beliefs about who you are and what you're capable of. And it's about having the courage to be vulnerable enough to put yourself out there and to live from that place and share share that with the world. And then inspired action is kind of touching on what you've been, I think, saying a couple of times today, is really operating from a place of purpose and making decisions with your own best interest and your goals in mind. So with emotional courage, it's the captain nudging the poet, like, come on, you can do this, put yourself out there. And then inspired action is the poet guiding the captain, like making good decisions from your values and what's important to you.
It sounds like we solved all the world's problems. Now, if we need to offer a small actionable nugget to anyone who's listening to this, and it's obviously adults listening to this, what's the smallest, most actionable piece of nugget that we can give for an adult listening to this and says, amazing, sign me up, I want more of this? How do they start to practice this within themselves? And then what's the first step that they can take with their children?
I think it's the same answer. I think even just to start thinking of those two parts of yourself, the poet is the being, like what's going on, how am I being right now, what am I feeling, what's stirring inside of me, and then the captain is, well, what am I going to do about it? So always knowing you have those resources, and even if it's to take a really small step, that's how life actually happens, right? So
cool, awesome. We guys, any last kind of thoughts to wrap up this incredible conversation?
I think so.
No, it's so great to be talking about it. I'm just happy to be here.
Absolutely. Where can everyone find you?
Online. It's captainsandpoets.com. All social handles are at Captains Poets. And of course, on LinkedIn, you can connect with either one of us. We're always looking for people who are, on this path that can help us learn, because that's a big thing for us, is keep that going, our own learning. And of course, teachers, educators, parents that want to guide their kids and their students. We're in for the long haul, and we're in for make sure to get the captains and poets all over the world.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
This is the last question, because you said you're in it for the long haul. What's the impact that you're trying to make on the world?
We want every kid to have the captain and poet in their back pocket, just to have that language, even if they're just exposed to it for 5 minutes and understand it, because I think it can remedy so many of the challenges that we're facing in the world, and even as adults, like to help them live more purposeful, fulfilling lives.
They have everything already within them, and they need to know that.
Absolutely. Incredible. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
That was your